What I want to do in the this next section is just give you four frames, four different angles to look at an organization from. And so I'm hoping you can use this at your work. You can use it in nonprofits. You can also do it as a tool in church life. And so what we're going to do in the next few minutes is let me introduce you to Dill and Bowman's book on reframing organizations. And you'll see what I mean here in a bit. So there are basically four frames that you can look at an organization through. One is resources, right? One is structural, one is human resources, the other one is political, and the other one is symbolic. So I'll explain these categories here in a bit for you, but your categories are structural. How is the organization structured? How is it staffed? Number two is what's the politics of it? And then number four is the symbolic frame. So you got those in your heads? Framing is simply a way of saying we're going to look at this organization through different angles. So framing is just a fancy word for we're going to look at it from different angles. I'll just leave it there. What I hope to do with students when I teach them this is that they walk in thinking structure, human resources, politics, symbol. And basically they walk in and they're able, blinking is a way to refer to almost instantly having the ability to look something over and tell what's going on in it. Some of us are naturally better at that than others, but it's the ability to walk into a place. It's kind of like reading the room, but you're reading the organization. So I do this with churches a lot where I'm invited in to consult. And one of the things I'm doing is I'm running it through these four lenses. I'm actually using these lenses to think about what am I looking at? Because organizations are really complex stuff. In fact, they're pretty volatile, complex stuff. So reframing is the ability to take these different frames and kind of flip them. Imagine flipping them through your mind as you're looking at an organization. Okay. Four frames. One is structural. You're simply asking, how is this thing structured? This is your traditional org chart. So if you drew it out for your organization, you'd have the board, the CEO, and then all the other folks functioning under the CEO. In academia, it would include your vice president and then your departmental heads and then the other folks who work under them. And so this is basically, the question you're really asking here is your organization structured to get the job done that it says it's trying to do? For example, if you say your mission statement is this, but your structure doesn't move in the direction of this, you're not going to accomplish this with that organization. And all kinds of things come into play here. Allocation of time, where we're putting our resources, how do we spend our time, what activities are we about? If your organization, let me use a church as an example. If your organization is about reaching new people for Jesus, and you spend all your resources on the old people you already have, you're not designed to fulfill the mission that you say you are. Your structure won't get you there. And so one of the things that we like to say is your organization is uniquely structured to get done what you're getting done right now. Did you hear that? Most of us don't like that because that's not what we're trying to do. So your structure, your current structure is uniquely designed to accomplish what you're accomplishing now. Now there's one deception that comes in with the structural frame of organization is that we will change structure before we'll actually change the other items I'm going to talk about, because structure is the easiest to fix, or at least we think it is. Real simple fix, fire the CEO. How did that fix anything? It only works if you hire somebody who can actually do the job, right? So firing the CEO, which is an easy thing to do, it makes you feel good that you blame somebody, but it doesn't actually make the organization more fit to actually accomplish its goals. Everybody kind of following along what I mean by this? Your structure you have to be able to demonstrate that your structure is actually meeting the goal of what you say the organization exists for. If your organization exists so that every member can share their gifts, but only the CEO gets to share their gift, the structure is designed not to accomplish what the mission of the organization is. In fact, I've got a church I'm working with right now who they think they can get their mission done right now better without calling a minister. They think they're better equipped now to do that, for this season anyway, based on what they think they need to accomplish. Let me say this another way. Whatever your mission is, your structure has to accomplish the mission. Okay? Let me say it another way. If your mission is this, but all your mission really is about hiring a new leader, your leader has to fit also the structure of the organization. Or said another way, if your mission is to feed the hungry, but you're so weak that all you're doing is raising money to make the organization survive, you're not accomplishing the mission. Okay? Have I said it enough time and flipped it around enough that you kind of get that the structure has to? Sometimes structure works against. For example, sometimes when we build a structure, and by structure I mean the org chart, people working for you, sometimes it becomes keeping certain people happy so they don't leave us. That's never the mission of an organization. Ever. Ever. So the structural frame is basically how do we organize to get the work done? And the question I would ask back after that is our current arrangement getting the work done? Is there something we could change structurally that would get the work done? You might need 2 leaders instead of 1. You might need a leader with a special set of skills. You might need an assistant. You might need more employees. You might need less employees. But again, don't be deceived that just changing these pieces around will actually change the culture of the organization. It's just one of the easiest things. So usually when companies restructure, they're usually talking about the org chart. That won't necessarily make it more effective. So keep that in mind as we talk about the other. The human resource frame, this is a little harder to talk about because you've got to have, let me talk nonprofit organizations now. You've got to have people with the right skills or you're just hurting yourself. And if you're keeping someone because they've served you for a long time but they can't do the job, that is not being faithful to the mission of the organization. Listen, I'm not a cutthroat kind of guy, but if somebody's responsible for an organization and it's supposed to be accomplishing mission and the current working staff can't get it done, something has to be done. So the human resources is, do you have the right skills? By the way, those of you that are on nonprofit boards, I notice these tables flip. I probably ought not sit on one of them.
You want some tea or?
No, I'm good. I'm good. Just trying to get a little bit different arrangement on the body, keep the body comfortable. For those of you that are on boards, you do know that your treasurer doesn't have to be a member of your board to be your treasurer. This is because CRA recognizes that to be the treasurer of an organization, you've got to have certain accounting skills. And boards are not often able to get all the skills. And so it's actually possible for you to have a treasurer who's not a member of the board serve you as your treasurer. and only show up for that part of the meeting or to be responsible for that part of the meeting, because CRA recognizes that you have to have people with certain accounting skills in order to do numbers right. Okay. If you are in a Christian ministry that's trying to accomplish a mission, and the person leading the mission does not have the required education or skills to get that job done, you're not doing it right. You gotta make a change. And by the way, it's the most compassionate thing to do, because having someone do a job they're not qualified for year in and year out will just wear them out. By the way, I've had to let people go before. Maybe you've been in a job where you've had to let people go. I often find folks that find themselves below the skill level are often relieved when somebody finally says, I don't think this is a good fit for you. Because we can't keep living in that space where it's not a good fit. So I know it's hard, I know it's difficult, but if you've got a good structure, but you've got the wrong people, it's not going to, and I'm not talking about membership in the kingdom of God. What I'm talking about is getting the job done. You've got to have the right skills in the right place. Yeah, so in the education business, you've got to have a master's if you're going to teach for me, because I can't have you teaching undergraduates unless you can show me that you've gone a level above them. And that's why education, if you teach master's level students, you're supposed to have a PhD. Kind of makes sense, right? You're supposed to be ahead of the student in your learning. So apply that as it wills. Let's say you need a child care worker, and the province says there's certain levels of training for doing this kind of things. You've got to get that person up to that level. By the way, we're always constantly improving now anyway, right? I'm taking a seminar here, a seminar there on things related to PR, or not PR, but HR, sorry. We're getting to the afternoon where the words begin to mumble a little bit. Okay, so the human resource frame is, do you have the right people? Sometimes this is said really simple. You've got to have the right people on the bus. I just think it's cruel to kick people off the bus. But anyway, you got to have the right people on the bus. Now, the political frame. And by the way, notice there's images here. Structural frame is that's like the factory with the cogs. The human resource is like a family with leadership, right? The political frame is a bit like a jungle. Let me explain this. Every organization will have politics. Politics is not a bad word. Politics, by the way, comes from the Greek word for city. And so it's living together as citizens in a city is where the word goes back to. But the fact is that every organization, including church, every organization will have politics. And so in order to lead that organization, you're going to have the political gifting to navigate that, to work with people, to create compromises where you find two people apart from each other, but you need them to work together. If you're the kind of person, I've met a few people like this saying, oh, I don't do politics. And I say, well, you don't do leadership then. Anywhere you got three people together, you got four opinions, right? At least four, maybe five.
Yeah, because it's sad because most of the churches now is being politicized. So what we see it on TVs and on the governments, we apply it on the church, right? So it seems to be like same as if like a jungle also inside the church, wherein we do some politics, and then
Yeah.
we forget the other, frames. But because of the external,
Yeah, but it's true. If you're unwilling to gain the skills, and if you're unwilling to work the politics, you can't get the organization to move forward. So you don't get to not work the internal politics. There's plenty of external politics, of course, which is dealing with government regulations and other things related to, or just Canada summer jobs. Have you guys taken advantage of Canada summer jobs to put in summer workers?
no.
Yeah, it's a bit nutty. I mean, you have to fill out an application, you have to fill out timesheets, you have to explain how you've got a mentoring system in place for the summer job, but you're basically trying to get the government to come alongside you and help you with some extra workers for the summer. But that's external politics, trying to work that kind of stuff. But internal politics is just getting people to work together. Not everybody can get their way. The organization won't move forward. And so the leader of the organization needs to be constantly trying to get people to move in that direction. The leader that's successful is the one who is actually able to mobilize the politics of the organization to accomplish something.
Yeah, because the politics is you have parties, right?
Yeah,
You have the conservative, and you have all those factions
yeah, yeah,
inside, right? So same as in the church, you have also the political
uh-huh.
parties
Uh-huh.
wherein people are in tune
Yeah.
with that person too and others, right?
Let me give you an example of where these two worlds come together. I'm going to use the church example again. Our elders at Bow Valley had to navigate. We had members who would not come unless everybody masked. Everybody put a mask on.
Mm.
We had other members who wouldn't come because everybody had a mask on.
Mm.
How do you win that one? And the elders were not trying to play political favor. The elders are the fiduciary, the financial people responsible for the organization from a governmental point of view. And so I was one of the elders at the time, so I know what went on as we tried to decide. We said we have to, in order to protect this organization from potential lawsuits or litigation, we have to do, to the best of our ability, what the government recommends. Of course, that essentially made the two poles that I was talking about upset because they thought we were bowing down to the government. No, we're trying to keep this organization in business so that when this thing is over, we're still in business. That's what we're trying to do. Yeah. But that we had to navigate those things, and I think we did a good job. There's a church in Ontario. They were radical anti-maskers, and they went that way the whole way. But by choosing that, they excluded all the people who were more careful. They didn't treat those folks with respect. Yeah. So sometimes it feels like there's no winning when it comes to this kind of stuff. So let me deal with the last frame. The symbolic frame is that all companies are built around symbols. If you just saw that much of this cup, you would know where it came from, wouldn't you? Yeah, this cup in this fashion that's not the symbol of Canada, although it is, but it's Tim Hortons, right? So this particular font is Tim Hortons. So there's lots of things that have branding to it. We've got a really interesting brand for ABC. I don't think we've got it on anything right here. This particular branding is the old school logo that went on the hoodies. Our hoodies have exactly the same label. And so it's the old Alberta Bible College, and it's got the white stitched on. In fact, I don't have one of those. You have a hoodie with you? But we put this font, we use this font every time. Why? Because we want the symbol to be recognized by people who see it. Organizations have symbols that go deeper than just our logos. For example, if I said Red Cross, you know what they do, right? The Red Cross is the old medical symbol, but they use it as their symbol, and the Red Cross, they help people with money that you give. So their symbol is that this is what we do. And so all kinds of organizations do that. In church life, let's use that as one of our example, there are certain things that we value that are really symbolic. Baptism, communion, worship. If those things aren't there as we expect them to, it throws off the balance, right? So there's certain things that we come to, and so if we disagree over the symbols, changing the organizational structure will not help the organization. If we disagree on the symbol, changing personnel will not help. We have to come together on the symbol. Let me give you one church example. There was a church, I think it was in Minnesota. It doesn't really matter, the illustration still works. But this church was trying to do something new, and so they hired two ministers to come in, two younger ministers to come in, and the younger the younger ministers looked at the congregation, and the congregation had large worship space with pews, and they wanted to make. Have you ever noticed the younger folks all want to get rid of the pews? I don't know if you guys still have pews. You got chairs.
Cheers.
You got chairs. Okay, so I won't be stepping on any holy ground here. Well, anyway, these old pews. They decided. The minister said, well, we need to make this space more multi-use. And so they wanted to get rid of the pews, and they wanted to put in chairs so that the space could be used differently. Okay. So they did it without telling anybody. I don't know why they had access to that much money, but anyway, they did it without telling anyone. It created a big argument within the life of the church, because the two younger guys didn't know the story of the church. The church was actually the merger of two congregations. One church gave the building, the other church gave the pews.
Mm.
The pews were part of the symbols. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you need to know the story of your organization in order to have the perspective of what is a symbol and what's not a symbol. Earlier I mentioned the funny thing about moving the sacred flower pot, but for some people that flower pot is the symbol. There was, I think it was GM that did this. There was a fear that robots would take over the lines of business at the car manufacturing place. You know, GM makes cars, and so one of their wise leaders put the robot in the lobby that was going to take the place of some of the workers, and people could walk by it and spit at it and curse at it and do whatever they needed to at the robot. And after a while, they began to ignore the robot, which did nothing but just sit there. But eventually, it did come in to take. Now, anytime technology changes like that, it creates new jobs in addition to the ones they take, right? So, but you don't feel that at first if your job is the one that's being taken. But again, the robot became a symbol for the future that they at first could just get upset at, and then after a while they ignored it. And then it became part of their story. Yeah.
And then if you were a smart worker, you'd get some training on how to fix robots when they have.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. You get training. Yeah, exactly.
So symbols can not only be visible, but it can also be abstract.
It can be very
stories.
abstract. It can be very abstract. Yeah. I was working with a congregation in Regina in which a member had formerly painted the lobby, and it was this kind of really strong mauve color. It was not a pretty color in my opinion. And it was really seriously time to repaint it. But they all remembered back when Sister so-and-so did the painting or painted the walls. And so, by the way, this person was no longer a member of the church, had actually transferred to a different church. And so, no longer a part of the church, but yet the symbol still had power because it reminded people of the time when she did all that work. Yeah. So, what we're saying here is that there may be 4 different ways of looking at an organization instead of just the way we normally do. For example, let's just replace the leader. That might actually introduce more problems instead of decreasing the ones that you have. The one that I think is absolutely harder to deal with is the second one, which is the human resource one. I've said it several times, you've just got to have the right people in the right chairs, or certain jobs can't happen.
So for this one, for the sake of everybody, like these four frames, like in the church, in the community church now, like as we look into the problems and situations of the community church, these are the four lenses wherein we can use,
Uh-huh.
right, to address problems and to make it move to make move forward, right?
Yeah.
So we don't only use political frames, symbolic frames, human resources, structure, but it's a combination as as time goes by, because change is not just not gradual,
That's right.
uh, but we need to apply these frames also to consider also
That's right.
other you know people,
Yeah.
right?
One of the things that I really like about the frames is that if if I'm on my own and I'm just asking questions, I ask certain questions. These four frames actually raises different questions that we might want to ask. So when a church is going through, or when an organization is going through a difficult transition period, it might be time to pull these out and say, okay, do we have a structure that actually will get the job done? Do we have the right people? Is there politics that we need to manage better?
Mm.
Is there symbols that we disagree about? And I think the symbols are actually going to become a bigger one, because as we bring in people from different parts of the world, from different backgrounds, different generations, they will disagree over what the various items of life together mean. And so having good conversations about, well, what does this mean? Asking people what it means to them is actually a good question. Yeah. There are some interesting, let me give you a couple of stories about symbols that might help you. I grew up in Oklahoma, Texas, in which it was traditional at the Lord's table. Let me use communion as an example here. It was traditional to have a white cloth over the bread, and actually over the juice too. Um, Nobody knew exactly why we had the white cloth over, but the cloth was always taken off and folded to the side, and the communion, the grape juice and the bread was passed around. We started getting interested in this tradition that had become pretty normal. You guys ready for this? You know what the white cloth was about? It was to keep the flies off back in the days before we had shut up buildings. It had so been embedded in the way that folks have done things.
Mm.
Yeah. Let me give you another illustration from the military. There was around the First World War, they were trying to make firing a cannon more effective. And so there was 4 soldiers involved in the process of setting the cannon up, and so um, they wanted to improve their time, so they hired an efficiency expert to take a look at all the procedures involved in getting a cannon to be fired. And so the expert asked, well, what are those 2 guys doing right there, right now? So there was I guess he's looking at footage, and he kind of stopped it and says, what are those guys doing right there? And the old commander looked at it and said, oh, they're holding the horses. Well, there are no horses in the Second War. Well, there are, but there's no horses for cannons. That they were still using procedures that had been basically developed in the American Civil War in the 1860s.
Mm.
And they only needed 2 soldiers instead of 4,
Mm.
because you don't need the 2 guys who are holding the horses.
Yeah.
This is true. Anything we have regular patterns with, we ought to ask, why is it the way it is? Because sometimes the patterns have nothing to do with theology, it's just the way, but we've done it so long that way, for most of us, it feels normal to do it that way. Yeah. And again, by this point, the 2 soldiers holding the horses are basically symbols, because they're certainly not holding horses.
Yeah, that's why the books of Dr. Jordan Peterson,
Uh-huh.
Maps of Symbols, I think, was very
Yeah.
attractive to young people because of the pattern that they can relate,
Mm-hmm.
right, on that books, right,
Mm-hmm.
wherein they can identify themselves on that patterns and symbols,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, I think symbols are very important
They're extremely important.
for inspiration, for church,
For
right?
orientation even.
Orientation.
Yeah, to kind of help us know our way.
Mm.
Yeah, if I go into a restaurant and it's got a Pepsi sign in there, I know I'm going to be disappointed. I don't drink Pepsi. I drink Coke. See, so there, if it says if it's Pepsi, then it's not a Coke place, you know. And
Yeah.
that's a little
Mm.
illustration of how symbols can impact us.
Yeah, because